Alright, I am back with another video, and today we have a bit of an interesting one. There was a post on my Discord server where somebody asked, hey, what could a decent build look like if you tried to play a spellcaster but could only use spells used from magic items? And I thought, huh, that's actually kind of a cool concept, because it immediately made me think of Final Fantasy VII's Materia system. For those of you who haven't played Final Fantasy VII, which I think in most cases is very, very few of you, but I'll explain anyway, the Materia system was basically a way for you to slot these little magic gems into pieces of your own equipment, which would allow you to cast spells or use certain abilities. It functions differently in some ways between the original and the remake games, but the basic concept is still that and is still there. And so that got me thinking, well, what would be the best class to make use of a build like that? And that got me thinking about Monk, which got me thinking about Tifa Lockheart, because, you know, amazing character. And I thought, hey, why don't we make a punchy fist monk who takes advantage of as many magic items as possible? Not a 4 elements monk. I've decided to make it a rule that we cannot get spellcasting in any way. None at all. Not from our base class or any sort of abilities, and 4 elements monk does count towards that. So we can only cast spells used from items. But luckily for us, monk is one of the best classes to make use of this playstyle. Most of you who have played this game can probably already figure out why, but trust me when I say this is actually going to be a pretty interesting build, because you would be surprised how much utility can be added to monk just by having a few spells that don't even come from its subclass. We're going to be adding a few other levels in here too to give us a little bit of extra utility. I also kind of wanted to do a bit of a Tifa Lockheart build, which, believe it or not, I actually have done before. An old video on the channel now was where I built Cloud for the first time, actually contained a little secret at the end where I had built Tifa, Aerith, and Barrett and Red 13 all in the same party, which was kind of fun. So yeah, overall, I hope you guys enjoy this video. I think it's going to be a fun and interesting kind of experiment, as it were, which actually results in a pretty solid build. So, without further ado, let's get into the build. First up, we are going to play as a human, just because, again, I'm basing this off of Tifa. Wanted to play a human. It could be any class you like. It doesn't matter. We're actually going to be starting off as a fighter today, though. Fighter is going to give us access to Second Wind, giving us a bit of a bonus action heal if we need it. We're also going to gain access to all weapons and armor. We're not going to be using these so much, but this does allow us to start with Constitution, I should say, saving throw proficiency, which is going to help with some concentration spells that we'll be getting our hands on a bit later. Moving on to our fighting style. Unfortunately, we don't use any of these. We're not using any weapons for this. I decided to keep it pretty much just monks unarmed strikes, although if you wanted to, you could slap finesse-based weapons on this build and be absolutely fine. So really, depending on what weapon you want to use, make sure you choose the correct one. I think in most cases, it's going to be dueling, and while you can use archery in this build as it stands today, as technically I do have a ranged weapon on this build, it's only there for its spell that we get, and isn't really needed for, you know, actually shooting things. So defense can work if you decide to wear armor on this build. Armor and unarmored defense is kind of optional, so you can kind of choose between that if you want a bit more AC. Otherwise, most finesse weapons are going to make use of dueling, so really, it's a pick your poison. I went with the folk hero background, again, just kind of leaning into how Tifa was like this bartender who lived down in the slums and, you know, was a kind of a, you know, a patron to the people in a way, and as such, eventually went on to also become, you know, basically a superhero, so, you know, folk hero makes sense. Giving us animal handling and survival, probably not too fitting for the character, but hey, we're a monk, those are both wisdom skills, might as well take them. So, speaking of skills, let's talk about our ability scores. Strength is at 8, we don't need it, but of course, if you want to go for Tavern Brawler shenanigans, you can always pick up Potions of Hill Giant Strength, and, you know, also the Tavern Brawler feat, maybe having your Constitution be at 15 and bumping that up. You know, you can play around with that. Dexterity is at 16, obviously this is going to be our main attacking modifier for our unarmed strikes. Constitution is at 14, again, you can have this a bit higher, especially if you decide to go for Tavern Brawler, but otherwise 14 should do us just fine. We're going to be dodging more often often than not. Intelligence is at 8, we just don't need it. Wisdom is at 16, as because we are going to be multiclassing into monk second after fighter, all of the magic items in this build are going to be using our wisdom for the spellcasting modifier for the attached spells, which means we needed to start with fighter on this build, which just made sense to do anyway. And finally, charisma is at 12. Obviously, this 12 can be kind of redistributed to any other stats you'd like, but I quite like having a 12 in charisma because, again, Tifa was a bartender, as well as the fact that we are going to be, wanting to be the face of the party if you're probably playing this character as Tav, so having a bit of charisma helps. Speaking of having charisma, because we're a human, we get to choose a skill proficiency of our choice. I went with persuasion. Combining that with the intimidation from fighter means that we have a pretty solid starting fate party face core for our build. We also got insight as well from fighter, as well as the aforementioned skills from our background. So overall, a pretty nice starting spread. Let's waste absolutely no time and jump over to Monk and get started on that. First off, we're going to get Flurry of Blows. You know the drill. We get to use a bonus action and a key point to punch twice in quick succession. We're also going to gain access to our unarmored defense, allowing us to add our wisdom modifier to our armor class, so long as we're not wearing armor. We're going to gain access to dexterous attacks, allowing us to use our dexterity instead of our strength for monk weapons and unarmed strikes. Of course, our unarmed strikes now become a 1d4, and after making an attack with a monk weapon or a unarmed strike of our action, we get an extra attack with an unarmed strike for free as a bonus action. So overall, pretty solid at level 1. You guys all know what Monk does at this point, surely. At Monk level 2, we're going to gain access to some pretty cool things, as you know, more key points, unarmored movement, as well as things like patient defense and our Step of the Wind. We mostly use, I would say, Step of the Wind dash in this build, actually. I've got an alternative to patient defense later on in the build, as well as we don't really need to use disengage as much, as we actually have a lot of spells that allow us to create distance and get out of attack of opportunity range, so disengage isn't as useful, but dash actually does help out a lot in the late game, and I'll explain when we get there. At Monk level 3, we get to choose our subclass. Now, obviously, an elemental caster monk or a magic-using monk would normally be Way of the Four Elements, but again, because we're operating under certain restrictions for this build, I've decided to go for Way of the Open Hand instead. I do think, though, any subclass works here. Really, the subclass doesn't actually matter that much, but again, because I wanted to build Tifa, as well as the fact that we're going to be getting some things with the Way of the Open Hand that are just going to be better for us in the long run, like Wholeness of Body and such, I did think that Way of the Open Hand made the most sense, but Way of Shadow, Way of Drunken Master, Way of Four Elements, they all work. This is honestly a pick-your-favourite situation, doesn't have a big impact on the build. I did build this with Way of the Open Hand in mind, though, because again, I'm thinking of like how Remake Tifa plays, where, you basically have this 3-hit combo, where you build up a bunch of chi. In that game, that's called chi, in this game, it's called ki. I don't get it, but it's whatever. And basically, you kind of just build up this fighting spirit, and you can just kind of, hit things really hard. That's basically what she does. She hits things really hard, and so do we. And we can also use Materia to cast spells, which is what we're doing in this. So really, any of these work. I like Way of the Drunken Master because it gives you things like deflect attacks, which feels very on brand, but obviously then you have all of the drunken animations, so that might not be everyone's cup of tea. Way of Shadow could be interesting if you want to be more of a kind of teleporty spellcaster assassin type, which could be very, very fun. Honestly, it's your flavor. And if you're not playing under the same restriction, Way of the Four Elements just for even more spells obviously makes a ton of sense. So really, pick your favorite subclass. It doesn't matter. But of course, with Way of the Open Hand, we're going to gain access to Topple, Stagger, and Push as additions to our Flurry of Blows, allowing us to either push a target 5 feet away, potentially stagger it, meaning that it can't take reactions, which can help you with disengaging, and then obviously Topple, which can knock it prone, giving you advantage on attacks against it, meaning it has to get up with its movement. So overall, pretty solid opening kit, if not a bit vanilla. At Monk level 4, you're going to gain access to Slow Fall, giving you resistance to falling damage, and more key point resources. But for now, we also get to choose our first feat of the build. Now, my early game choice for the equipment here, I guess I'm just going to say it, is the, oh my gosh, what's the name of it? Oh my goodness, the something cloth, the graceful cloth, that was it, which gives you a +2 to dexterity. So you can actually start with your wisdom being leveled up first, because we're already going to have an 18 in dexterity at this point, so we can actually go straight for a feat or an ability score improvement. I personally think that there are some feats you could get for this build. Obviously, this would be where you pick Tavern Brawler if you're going with that strategy. Tough is also kind of nice on this build, really, entirely up to you. But I do just think taking a flat ability score increase to our Wisdom is going to be the best move here. At monk level 5, you're going to gain access to extra attack as well as stunning strike, a very, very powerful move if it goes off, and obviously extra attack is something you always want in the martial build, so we've kind of gunned for it. And then at level 6 of monk, you're going to gain access to some pretty damn awesome things with open hand. First off, we're going to get key empowered strikes, meaning that now resistance to non-magical damage doesn't mean anything to us. Our punches go through most things. We get improved unarmored movement, making us even faster, as well as the manifestation of body, mind, and soul, allowing us to add additional necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage to our attacks, increased by our wisdom modifier. I went with radiant for the most part with this build, but really you can pick anything, and I like the idea of like kind of having elemental punches as well, like kind of like the off elements, I'd like to call them, the kind of sub elements that are kind of their own thing, but they're not really on like the elemental scale, like fire, wind, water, and earth. This is going nowhere. Basically, you get to punch with something that isn't often resisted. That's what I'm trying to get at here. We're also getting access to wholeness of body, allowing us to regain half of our key points immediately, enter a temporary state of wholeness, where we regain key points and have an extra bonus action for 3 turns, and it also immediately heals us for 15 HP. Obviously, this means that we can charge up our chi, our chakra, whatever you want to call it, whatever it was called in Remake, and basically just get into a powered-up state where we can deliver a limit break of sorts. In fact, we're actually going to have a pretty big limit break combo in this build, which is always fun. So yeah, wholeness of body, totally busted feature in my opinion, but I love it. Now, we could go to monk level 7, but I actually do want to jump back to fighter for a little bit. Let's talk about that. First up, we get to choose actions. We get action surge at this level. This is also going to be a part of our kind of limit break combo where we get a whole extra action. So, the way your turn is going to go is on your previous turn you will have activated wholeness of body, giving you access to a second bonus action, a bit of healing, and some of your resources back. Then, on your next turn, you attack twice with your action surge, attack twice again, then 2 flurry of blows as a bonus action. I mean, this is a classic combo in Baldur's Gate, everybody knows this. Action Surge on a monk is absolutely absurd. However, the reason why I really like Action Surge on this build, as well as having access to the extra bonus action from Monk, is because now when we use our magic items as an action, we can still feel like we're able to attack. We can still do multiple flurry of blows, we can still activate Action Surge to have another turn where we can still punch or activate a second magic item. So we're going to feel like we're actually using spells quite often. Because Monk can be so bonus action heavy on its offense, you still have your action to cast your spells. So combining Action Surge with Wholeness of Body just means you're going to be casting spells, killing folks, and punching folks, and you're going to be doing a lot of damage and just have a bunch of battlefield control from some of your spell effects, which is really, really nice. Now, I will briefly talk about this now, although in my testing I actually saved this level for kind of like the end of the build. I'm going to go over it now for you. You have a choice. You can either go for a 2-10 split between Monk and, Fighter, or you can go for what I went for in the end, which was a 3-9 split, which means you get access to a Fighter subclass, in which I would say 2 are available to us here, under the restrictions of the build. Obviously, we're going to ignore Arcane Archer and Eldritch Knight for this build, because, well, they're both magic things, which we don't really want. Although you could argue Arcane Archer is technically using magic items for the fact that the arrows are the magical part, but it's your magic that you're channeling through them, so either way, again, we're not a shooty bang person. Although, Arcane Archer Monk would be a very fun build. Have I made it before? I can't remember. Let me know if I've made it before. I probably have. But anyway, so 2 that we have access to. The first one is Champion, which just reduces your increases your chance to critical hit by reducing the number needing to be rolled by 1. And this effect can stack with other effects, so want to go for a crit fish? You can go for a crit fish. However, Battlemaster was my kind of subclass of choice. But you may be thinking, why Battlemaster? Don't all the maneuvers need a weapon? No. Let me explain why this actually adds a lot to the build. First off, our first choice is Evasive Footwork. This allows us to impose disadvantage on all melee attacks against us. So it's a slightly worse version of Patient Defense, which we get from Monk. So why do we want this? Well, there's 2 distinct advantages. One, this costs superiority die, not key points, so we can focus more of our key points on our offense, which is great. It kind of helps solve Monk's resource problem. Also though, this does not take an action of any kind. You just spend the superiority die and you get the bonus. Meaning that we can exhaust our full turn without needing to spend a bonus action on Patient Defense, and then effectively get Diet Patient Defense. Patient Defense Light, as it were. So really, It's kind of just an extra button you can push if you feel like you're in a little bit of danger without any real cost to you, which is cool. Do you know what else works with this build, though? Riposte, believe it or not, actually does. The animation is a little bit scuffed because you kind of swing an invisible weapon, but believe it or not, you can still activate Riposte with your unarmed strike, and it will work. Sometimes. I think the damage, like maybe the calc for the hit is a bit off sometimes. It can be a bit funky, but it can still work. I'm understanding that I'm coming at you with a big what if here, but trust me, I have seen it work in testing. It's just a bit inconsistent, as all kind of reaction-based counterattacks are, so, you know, use at your own peril, I guess. But then there's a couple of others. Obviously, Rally works. Gives you temporary hit points, that's not tied to a weapon. Sure, why not? Well, it gives you an ally temporary hit points. Commander Strike also works, meaning you could be a bit of a team player or giving someone else a bit of an extra attack, which is kind of nice. The others, however, I don't think work. I'm pretty sure Precision Attack doesn't work, but it might do. But I know for a fact Commander Strike works, and it gives you a bit of a team player kind of synergy, so I like to go with that. But otherwise, Evasive Footwork is just a really nice thing to have, and I kind of like having that more than Monk's level 10 feature, so I personally like this quite a bit, but again, if you want to keep it simple, just go for Champion and do some critical hit fishing. You could technically push this to level 4 as well for another feat if you want to have 3 feats in this build. Otherwise though, I actually do want stuff from level 9 of Monk, so we're going to jump over to that. Next up, we're going to get Evasion, allowing us to take whenever we would take half damage from a dex save, we take no damage if we succeed and only half if we fail. Which, you know, typical Monk stuff, rogues also get it. And Stillness of Mind, basically, we can't be charmed or frightened. Moving on to Monk level 8, our second feat of the build, and because at this point I would actually suggest we're in the late game, I want you to swap out the Graceful Cloth for something else, you're going to take that dex bonus to keep us at 18. And then finally at Monk level 9, you're going to get advanced unarmored movement, meaning the difficult terrain will no longer slow us down, and you can jump a bit further, which is nice. However, we're here for another part of our limit break combo, which is key resonation. Now, picture this. Part of your attacks that you use with your limit break, wholeness of body turn are now key resonation, meaning that you hit the creatures with your attacks, then they resonate with your key, which means at the very end, you can cause them to just explode. So imagine, you're dashing through, casting spells, punching people, leaving them all with resonating key, and then your turn ends, you activate Evasive Footwork to dodge, and then you just snap your fingers, and then everyone explodes behind you because cool people don't look at explosions. It just feels like a massively big kind of fighter combo to kind of work with our magic that we're getting from our magic items. So overall, I just really wanted it. I never get to use this level of open hand monk, so I want to blow people up. Just explode. Don't take that out of context, please. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a pretty decent all-around fighter. Obviously, the combination of fighter and monk in this way has been popularized for a long time. It is strong. It is very strong. Obviously, you get the ability to attack a stupid amount of times in a turn when you combine everything together, and being able to make those stunning strikes, key resonation blasts, being able to dodge for free and not really have to spend any resources, like your bonus action, is really nice. You've got plentiful healing between wholeness of body and second wind, giving you a little bit of extra there as well if you need it. You've got Commander Strike to be a team player. You've got Step of the Wind to just be mobile. You've got so many things going for you, and you just have a massive output of damage. Again, technically, this could be optimized further. Taking those points out of Charisma, popping them into Constitution, bumping up your Constitution to a 16 with Tavern Brawler, and then using the Potions of Hell Giant Strength would obviously just take this build into absolute overdrive, but that's a bit of power building territory, where I really like to focus more on interesting concepts, ideas, and lore. I haven't done a proper lore build in a while. Should really get back to that. But anyways, now the main attraction, what you're all here for, and that is the magic items, which, as you can see, we have quite a lot to go over, so let's talk about it. First off, for our weapons, obviously we have no melee weapons, but there are melee weapons with spells if you would like to use them. But obviously I'm trying to stick to the punchy fist monk idea here, which is why our melee slot is empty. However, in order to get us some more magic spells, I did decide to bring the classic Hellfire hand crossbow and never miss a combo. Why? because they obviously come with 2 spells that we can use. First up is Scorching Ray Shot, giving us access to a level 3 version of Scorching Ray once per short rest. So this is going to be a spell we're going to be able to cast pretty damn consistently. We actually really like short rests on this build because both of our key points and our superiority die come back on a short rest, so we're very, very good at resource management. We also get to cast Magic Missile from the Never Misser once per short rest as well, at level 3, dealing a pretty sizable chunk of guaranteed force damage, which is really nice. So even though we're not really using these to attack, it's still nice to have them. Just for their spells alone, that short rest recovery is really, really solid. Now, let's talk about our headpiece of choice. That is the Circlet of Blasting. I've never used this in a build before. Another channel first. This is here because it gives us Scorching Ray at level 2 once per long rest. It is an item with a spell. That's it. Scorching Ray is a good spell. Could be helpful at some point in the game. Kind of wanted to include it here just because I never have before. So let's talk about some other stuff. These other hats you should consider. We actually deal a lot of fire damage with this build, depending on the choices that you take with your, obviously we have Scorching Ray Shot and such like that. So the hat of Fire Acuity, giving you a bonus to your Arcane Acuity, which, for those of you that don't know, gives you a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls and difficulty class for each remaining turn, means that every time we deal fire damage, say if we're wearing the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle to give us extra fire damage on all of our unarmed strikes, we'd be able to build this up pretty quickly, and then all of our spells are pretty much just going to go off, which would be very useful. So it's a good combination to have. However, I also need to talk about the Pyro Quickness hat for the late game, which would allow us to get an extra bonus action, meaning that we can have a grand total of 3 bonus actions max on this build if we use our, if we basically cast a leveled fire spell, which can be any of the fire spells from our list of things here. So like our Scorching Ray Shot, for example, or the Scorching Ray that we can get from the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle. I'll talk about them in a minute. So basically, if you decide to go down the fire route with this build, you will have potentially 3 bonus actions to use, or you could very somewhat consistently have 2, to just go absolutely crazy on your limit break turn. Like, think about it. Action Surge, 3 bonus actions. Key Resonance. This build nukes people, and that's kind of what Tifa does, so I'm kind of happy I built it. But yeah, so feel free to consider these other options as well. Even though they don't directly give us spells, they both have effects that greatly benefit the build, so I recommend that. Now, the Cloak of Protection is what I went for here. Technically, we get the spell Absorb Elements from the Cloak of Absorb Elements, I guess. But you don't really need to have that here. I think I just prefer the Cloak of Protection to round out our AC to a nice and even 20. Now, for our chest piece, obviously I already talked about the Graceful Cloth in the early game, giving you a +2 to your Dexterity, as well as increased Dexterity saving throws and jump distance. That's fine, that's all well and good. But in the late game, I really like the Garb of Land and Sky. If you use Patient Defense, which, again, we won't be doing too much because we mainly want to focus on using Evasive Footwork, you're going to get the effects of Blade Ward, giving you resistance just on the off chance that something does actually hit you. However, while using your Step of the Wind, your next attack roll will have advantage and will deal an additional 1d8 of force damage. So it's a magically charged punch, which I quite like, and gives you a +1 bonus to your armor class. Now, this next bit's going to take a while. We need to talk about the gloves. Everyone knows that in this game, monks have access to a wide variety of gloves that change your unarmed strikes to give you an additional bit of elemental damage, as well as giving you a spell to match that element. So let's talk about them. The one I used for my testing, because I've never really used it before, is the Seraphic Pugilist Gloves, giving you an additional 1d4 radiant damage. Obviously this fits nicely with the extra radiant damage we can stack on. Here alone, we have about 11 to 24 damage here, with 2d4 plus 4 radiant damage added on to our 1d8 plus 4 bludgeoning damage. Another reason I wanted to go to level 9 of Monk was bumping up that unarmed strike damage die. Again, think of the Tavern Brawler implications of this. Kinda strong. So, the Seraphic Pugilist Gloves also come with Guiding Bolts, allowing you to fire a Radiant Key Blast of sorts, making the next attack roll against the target that you hit has advantage, and you deal 7d6 radiant damage because this is cast at level 4. However, you may be noticing that once per long rest restriction, and therein lies the rub. Most of these spell-granting gloves have a long rest condition for their spells, which is why you're not going to be using just one, you gotta collect them all. You're literally gaining sort of a light materia system here. You're going to have to swap out your gloves each combat, carefully planning out which one is going to be useful for each encounter depending on resistances and weaknesses. Basically gaining access to a wide variety of spells by swapping out your gloves. Sometimes if you want to get really zesty, you can use Action Surge to switch mid-combat and still be able to get a turn of attacks in, but otherwise you're mainly going to want to be doing that outside of combat. So you're going to get one pretty powerful spell per glove. However, unless you're long resting frequently, which you should be in this game anyway, it kind of encourages that, you're going to want to make sure that you're kind of swapping between gloves based on the situation, which is just a fun kind of thing to do in a playthrough anyway. Makes you feel like a fun little strategist, like you're doing a type matchups, which is kind of fun. So yeah, obviously the Seraphic Pugilist gloves give you Guiding Bolt and Radiant damage, which is great. We can also talk about one I've already mentioned quite a few times, the gloves of Cinder and Sizzle, giving you an extra d4 of fire damage, as well as the ability to cast Scorching Ray at the 3rd level once per long rest. This one is the same as Scorching Ray Shot for us, except with a long rest restriction rather than a short rest restriction. But obviously, having 2 fire spells like Scorching Ray, not exactly a bad thing, or even up to 3 with the Circuit of Blasting, because obviously we have stuff that's related to fire damage if we need it, although obviously you won't be using the Circuit of Blasting if you're using the other fire headpieces that I talked about, but you get the point. Cast this and gain some benefits. Works, right? I feel like this one synergizes most with the 2 other hats, so since this is the one you get earliest on in the game, aside from the Sparkle Hands, which I'll talk about in a bit, this is probably going to be your bread and butter for a while. But let's continue to talk about the rest. Next up is the Snow-Dusted Monastery Gloves, giving your unarmed attacks cold damage, and the Ice Knife spell cast at level 3, which deals an additional 4d6 cold damage, which is quite nice, and a bit of piercing damage as well, so it's a nice, fun ranged attack. Can also create ice surfaces, which can slip up our opponents, allowing our extra movement speed to really be an advantage for us. We also gain access to the Thunder Palm Strikers. These deal thunder damage, and give you an additional spell in the form of Thunder Wave that deals 4d8 damage and can push away targets based on a con save. Now, obviously, a lot of endgame enemies, they will save on a con save, but hey, that 4d8 thunder damage is pretty damn nice to have, and being able to push enemies away from you is a nice way to disengage without needing to disengage. There's also, and these are one of my personal favourites, the Servitor of the Black Hand Gloves. These add force damage and give you the Fear spell, which is something a bit unique for this build, and I actually quite like it. Obviously, hostile targets will become fearful, meaning that they'll have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls and have to drop the things in their hands. And yeah, no, it's a very, very fun little addition to the build. I quite like it. Now, obviously, there's also Gortash's Gauntlet that you pull whenever he's stoned from. This is technically the early access version, or the one that Gortash has equipped, but the real version you can get in-game does basically the same thing. You'll have an extra d4 of damage, you'll have a bonus to your spell save DC, but it will also come with the Command spell, which obviously has a lot of implications as well for fun gameplay moments. And then finally, of course, I have to talk about the Hell Dust Gloves, giving you a +1 bonus to your spell attack rolls and spell save DC. All of your weapon attacks will deal an additional bit of fire damage if you're using weapons, and all of your unarmed strikes will deal necrotic damage and can possibly inflict bleeding. This also comes with the Rays of Fire cantrip, a souped up version of Scorching Ray, which can be used once per short rest. This is obviously the best option, which is why it's the very, very end game option. However, you need to note that if you plan to use the Pyro Quickness hat here, Rays of Fire is a cantrip, not a leveled spell. It will not trigger the Pyro Quickness bonus. Even though this comes with more raw damage, it might not always be the best option. Oh, who am I kidding? It's always the best option, but it's the least interesting option. Play with the other options. They're also quite fun. Now, I will also talk about the Sparkle Hands. Let's just say, for example, that you're out of short rests, you've used up all your spells on these things, then grab the Sparkle Hands as well. Every single attack you have, you deal will give you lightning charges, while you have lightning charges on you. Attacks against metal constructs and foes wearing metal armor will have advantage, which is great. Now, lightning charges will add a bit of extra lightning damage to all of your attacks and give you a +1 bonus to your attack rolls. Then, once you gain 5 charges, your next attack is going to deal an additional 1d8 of lightning damage. This is just your last resort if you somehow run out of spells, although it is very, very good in the very early game, and it's probably my first early game choice before you hit the monastery and get the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle. So yeah, those are almost all of your glove options, because you can see I've left something extra. Now, there is an extra set of these elemental gloves that was actually cut from the game, but is still fully functional. Now, on both console and PC, there are mods that restore this cut content, in which case, you would actually be able to get your hands pretty easily on the Forked Lightning Fingers. These give you an extra 1d4 of lightning damage and a level 3 casting of Lightning Bolt, which will deal 8d6 lightning damage in a line in front of you. I hate that these are not in the game, because the Goku build would have been a lot better. So yeah, basically this gives you a bloody Kamehameha once per long rest, which is really cool. I'm so sad that these got cut from the game for some reason, but they're still fully functional in there. So if you have a small little mod, depending on whatever platform you're on, that restores this bit of content, then please use it, because I think it is an excellent addition to the build. But technically, I can't say it's a part of the build because it's not vanilla, and I did not say this is a modded build. So, you know, yeah, you get it. You get it. You get it. Use this if you can, because it's fun. But yes, those are all of the magical glove options. Let's move on. Of course, the only boots that we have that are going to give us a spell is Misty Step. Technically, there's Mistress Boots that give us Featherfall, but let's use Misty Step instead. We cannot be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and cannot slip on grease or ice, so that Ice Knife is a lot more useful than we think. And Misty Step is obviously a free teleport around the map once per short rest, so we definitely want that. Moving on to your necklace choice. The obvious choice for this is the Sentient Amulet. It's literally made for Monk. It's going to give you access to Key Restoration, which allows you to, once per long rest, restore a number of key points equal to a roll of your martial arts die. So basically, what this does is you... Oh no, actually it's just equal to your martial arts die. So your highest martial arts die is how much key points you restore. So, because ours is a 1d8 by the end game, we're just going to get 8 key points back once per long rest, which is really, really nice if we run out of short rests. However, of course, it's also going to give us access to Shatter as a level 2 spell, allowing us to deal 48 thunder damage and damage all nearby creatures and objects. It's an AoE effect. Creatures made of inorganic materials such as stone will have disadvantage on the saving throw, taking half damage if they succeed. Which, I mean, it's just another spell. It's what we want. In the early game, though, you can replace this with the Psychic Spark, allowing your magic missile from your Never Misser to shoot an extra missile, and giving you an additional level 1 usage of magic missile too. Now, moving on to the rings, as we do have 3 different options. The first one is the Ring of Absolute Force. If you have the Absolutes brand, they deal an additional 1 damage with thunder damage spells and attacks. But basically, you can have a 1d4 plus 1 if you combine this with the Thunder hands, the Thunder gloves, as well as it gives you another usage of Thunder Wave. Just a little one, but hey, a little's better than nothing. You can choose to swap this out, of course, for the Ring of Blink, giving you the Blink spell, which I think is the most useful out of all of the kind of miscellaneous spell rings that I've not included on the main build here. Things like Dominate Beast and such is cool, but not something we really need. Or Create Undead just kind of didn't feel right for the build. So, I like Ring of Blink here. We also have access to the Shifting Corpus Ring. Again, we're a fast monk, so maybe we can give ourselves a bit extra when we use our agility. Obviously, we can use invisibility, making us nice and stealthy, giving us another reason to use our dex, as well as blur, making it so attackers will have disadvantage against us in another way. This one requires concentration, though, but we can keep it up on subsequent turns without having to spend more key points. But yeah, that is the build. Overall, I think it's actually a pretty interesting take on Monk, so I hope you enjoy it. Now, for the fashion. Okay, I need to address the elephant in the room, don't I? I don't know why I went with this outfit. I made this build late at night and I've just sat down to record now and realized exactly what I put this character in. I think I was like, oh yeah, this looks very, very monkish, and I just did not pay attention to the middle bit. We're just going to roll with it, okay? We're going to pretend that hasn't been staring at our screen for the past 15, 20 minutes. Anyways, the outfit of choice is Fear Tailor's 9. Combined with the leather boots 2, with the leather gloves, all from Fear Tailor's Camp Clothing, coloured in actually 3 different dyes. The chest piece is coloured in the Ogma dye from Faerun Colours. Again, both these mods are available on all platforms. The Asmodeus dye for the gloves to give us a kind of black and red look, like Tifa's actual gloves. And the boots were coloured a pure kind of black with a touch of red, thanks to Sars Tam. So yeah, that's the build. Let's switch to combat footage now, so people aren't going to think I'm a weirdo for putting a character in an outfit like this. Oh, good lord. I mean, people already thought I was a weirdo. There was a naked character in one build. Yeah, does anybody remember that? Does anybody remember the Sharess days? Oh, you know, it took months for you guys to let me live that one down. Anyways, that is the build. And overall, I mean, at the end of the day, you're playing fighter monk. You could be naked. You could have no equipment and be absolutely fine. Everything else is a bonus, but the way it's set up, the fact that we're using open hand, having multiple ways to get additional bonus actions, the fact that we have action surge, allowing us to get an extra action, means that we're a surprisingly effective spellcaster using our magic items here, not just punching things all the time. We punch things a lot of the time, but every so often we can throw a pretty potent spell in there too to spice up the gameplay and really just add kind of a new fantasy to the class that didn't really exist before. Yes, 4 elements exists. It's just not the same, man, because, like, as much as I love 4 elements, the fact that all your element stuff takes your key points, which takes away from your punch-in, I mean, I like it, but it just doesn't quite sit right with me. Where with this, everything is on a different resource. You have your superiority die for repost and evasive footwork more often than not. You also, and the ability to use Commander Strike. All of your spells have short or long rest recharges. That's just it. No other resource required other than the actions to use them. And then you just get to spend all of your monk stuff on monk stuff. I know people kind of worry about having split resources in builds like this. It leads to some sort of anti-synergy sometimes. But in my opinion, this is just good synergy. It really works. You're very, very, very resource efficient, which I just think works really nicely for the build. And just adds a nice twist to your typical monk. And I've not even talked about spell scrolls in this build. You add spell scrolls to the mix? I mean, you're going to be giving the paladin a run for his money at that point as being kind of, or the hexblade or whatever, as kind of being the martial spellcaster. It surprisingly works. Maybe I need to actually examine like a different type of build where it's kind of just spell scrolls only and seeing which class can make the best use of that isn't a spellcaster. Let me know if you want to see that build. It's probably going to be rogue. Alright, that's going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.